Well, good morning everybody and welcome to the Dorset Council Northern Area Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Sherry Jesperson and I'm chair of this committee. This meeting is being live streamed to the public and a copy of the recording will be available on the Dorset Council website in due course. First, can we take a roll call of the councillors who are present in this meeting? When I call your name, could you unmute, indicate that you're here and then mute your microphones again. So without more ado, Councillor John Andrews.
Present.
Councillor Tim Cook.
Present.
Councillor Les Fry.
Present.
Councillor Matt Hall.
Present.
Councillor Brian Heatley.
Present.
Councillor Carol Jones.
Present.
Councillor Emma Parker.
Present.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
Present.
Councillor Val Pothecary.
Present.
Councillor Belinda Rideout.
Present.
And Councillor David Taylor. Councillor Taylor. Right, Councillor Taylor's not with us yet. If he joins the meeting later, we'll note that. But we'll note him as absent at this point. Thank you very much. Now we also have a number of Dorset Council officers who will be participating at various points in the meeting, and they will introduce themselves when they first speak. So we've got a full agenda today. So we will take a comfort break on completion of agenda item 5B, and then we'll pause at 12 noon to observe the national minute silence to mark the anniversary of the first lockdown and to spend a minute just reflecting on the year that has passed. And I know that there are a number of members indeed of this committee who have some sadnesses to reflect on, as indeed I do myself. So we'll just observe the minute silence and then we will recommence the meeting at exactly the point that we left off. So there's no interruption to our business. We will then break for lunch on completion of agenda item 5C, and we will reconvene at 2 o'clock. So now, if I may, a word about the procedures. This is benefit of the people who might be viewing the meeting. So for each application, I invite the case officer to present their report and recommendations, followed by presentations from other relevant officers. Members of the public have been invited to submit written representations to a maximum of 450 words. These submissions have all been read by the officers and by the committee members. Up to 3 submissions in support and 3 against may be read to the meeting by a council officer. Representations will be taken in the following order: members of the public, the town or parish council, the ward member, who as a member of the council may address the meeting live, and finally the applicant. Following the representations from the public, members may then ask points of clarification, and then the committee will deliberate and come to a view, at the end of which I will take a vote by roll call. As I call your name, members, please confirm that you have been able to listen to the full debate on that item, and then say whether you are for, against or abstain. Thank you very much. Enough from me. Moving on to our agenda then. We have apologies from absence, I think, David Taylor, because he's not here yet.
Yes, apologies.
Yes, David Taylor has sent his apologies. Thank you very much. Item 2, members, do any of you have a declaration of interest that you need to declare for any of the items before us? If you would indicate in the chat box. Councillor Heatley.
Thank you, Chair. This is about item 5F, 54 West Street, Fontmill, Magna. My wife's cousin lives at 58 West Street, which is just a couple of doors away, and I think it would be better if I took no part in that item.
Okay, thank you very much. Have we any other declarations of interest? Councillor Pothecary.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to declare a pecuniary and personal interest in agenda item 5C. Pecuniary because I live opposite the development site, and personal because I led the campaign and petition to try and save St Martin's House before it was demolished. Thank you.
Yeah, very clear. Thank you very much. Anybody else? So members, if as we're proceeding through the agenda, a conflict of interest does occur to you, you can always bring it to our attention then. Thank you very much. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting of the 16th of February are a correct record? If you would just indicate in the chat box if you don't agree with the minutes. I'm seeing nothing. That's helpful. Thank you very much. I will take these as a correct record. Item 4, public participation, I've covered. So item 5, moving on to our first application then. This is to form a floodplain compensation area on land adjacent to the Gillingham Principal Street. Now, members, you'll remember we've seen this site back in November when we approved the application for the Principal Street. I hope, but when it gets built, it gets a better name than Principal Street. But you will remember that application, and this application is the next step along that. You will remember, of course, that the Principal Street is before us because it's a key part of the Gillingham Southern Extension. So planning area lead for Gillingham, Simon McFarlane, will now present his report. Simon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sherry. Good morning, members. I'll just load up my presentation.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's on the screen now, thank you.
Super. Okay, thanks for the introduction, Sherry. I won't read out the description again. As stated, this application is in respect of the Gillingham Southern Extension. This particular application forms an area of land just to the west of the central element in orange, round about here. And just as a reminder, this particular part of the allocation is the area of land that the Principal Street runs through, and is currently allocated for about 961 dwellings. This was the application that was before members several months ago. This is the detailed application for the Principal Street. As a result of this planning application, it became clear that a small area of land in this area here on the western access is within the floodplain, and due to some of the raising of embankments to build the Principal Street, there's a subsequent loss of floodplain area, and therefore there's a requirement to compensate for that. The reason that this is a separate application is because that area needed to be outside of that red line boundary, and hence it necessitated the need for this application today. So this is the application red line area. So the area of flood compensation is basically just a like-for-like storage replacement. And so you created depression in the land to the same volume that would be lost by the creation of the Principal Street. So the depression in volume is half within the floodplain and half out of the floodplain, and will discharge into the River Loddon. In terms of what this really means in terms of levels, this is a longitudinal section, and basically it will be a gently sloping depression created in the land with levels sort of a maximum of 0.89 metres below the existing ground level. As shallow as 0.62. So in the interim, cattle will still graze in this area, and it won't be exactly a hazard. It would just be a gently sloping depression in the land that will flood on occasion. This is the area overlaid on the illustrative master plan of the central section of the allocation. So you'll see it does slightly impinge on part of the developable area of this site. So upon the submission of reserved matters in the future, the end subsequent developer will have to take this into account, and in discharging the planning conditions that were attached or are attached to the outline application to do with flood risk, to do with landscaping, to do with drainage, they will design their final scheme with this area in mind, so it will become part of their landscaping area, and hopefully can be of some public amenity value. So in terms of the timing of delivery, there's a condition on this application before you today that says development must be commenced within 3 years. There's also a planning condition on the principal street application, which states that prior to the commencement of the principal street, a scheme for the provision of this storage area should be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority and subsequently implemented. So before any work starts on the principal street, we'll agree a detailed programme of works with the highways team for when this area will be provided, because it should be provided before or during the construction and not after. So in conclusion, when all issues are considered and in the balance, the conclusion is that the benefits of the reduction in flood risk combined with the facilitation of the wider development warrant the approval of the application, and therefore the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement which addresses access to this land for monitoring, maintenance and inspection of the flood storage area, and the conditions listed at the end of the report. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. That was very clear indeed. I'll now ask Steve Savage, who's Dorset Highways Transport Development Manager, to add his views to the report. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. The Highway Authority wasn't consulted specifically on this application, Chair, because it obviously has no highway safety implications, so we have no comments to make on it. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. We have no public representations on this application, but one of the ward members, Councillor David Walsh, would like to speak to the committee on this. So, Councillor Walsh, if you're with us, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good morning, members. I will be brief. And to that end, I would like to speak on agenda items 5A and 5B together. Because, members, you've all heard me speak about the Gillingham Southern Extension many times, because I've been involved in it for the last 10 years, as has Councillor Apothecary and Councillor Rideout, supporting the community. The very nature of agenda items 5A and 5B show that every I has been dotted and every T crossed. You've heard about how Sajid Javid, the then Secretary of State, held up the people of Gillingham as an exemplar nationally, saying that this was how he wanted communities to work together, master planning the future of their areas. We then went to government to get money to build this road, so that construction traffic did not have to go through Ham Farm Estate, past St Mary the Virgin Primary School, still without safety markings, because the roads still haven't been offered up for adoption after all this time. We have the money and the plans to build the access road, so let's get on with it. Because one thing you may not be aware of, in the time it has taken this huge beast to get to the starting line, speculative developers are trying to come round the side door. And we need to help inspectors when hearing appeals by showing that not only is a southern extension possible, but it is actually deliverable. And this road will be the first stage in delivering what Gillingham Town Council, Gillingham Neighbourhood Plan Group, and the Gillingham communities have worked together for so long. So I ask you on behalf of the people of Gillingham to get the Gillingham Southern Extension started before they end up with developments they didn't plan for because they didn't actually want. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, have you questions, first of all, about matters of clarification for questions? Councillor Cook, is yours questions?
Yes, it is, Chairman. It's a couple of questions, actually. One comment that was made at the beginning of the presentation was that this flood relief falls half within and half without the floodplain area. One question on that is the portion of it that falls without the floodplain area is it actually going to get used, or should it all be within? And the second question is that it was again mentioned that the this portion of the work should happen before any development commences. Is that a should, or can we take a decision to say it must happen before the development goes ahead?
Thank you very much. I think the latter might be a matter of planning speak, and I'm sure that's what I understood it to mean, but yes. But could we answer the first question then about whether or not the whole of this compensation area needs to be within the floodplain? Simon.
Yeah, hi Sherry. Yeah, just to clarify, so in creating the depression, you will allow in probably the most extreme events when there's a big flood, that the entirety of this depression could flood and is likely to flood. I think for the vast majority of the time and for the vast majority of the year, most of this area will remain dry, but the expectation is that it can flood on occasion. In respect to the second question, the condition attached to the principal street application allows us to agree that timetable, and you're right, it will be not a should, it will be a must. So the timetable that we agree with the Highways Authority will be it must be delivered at a certain point during or before construction, and I think there's every intention to get on and create this area almost immediately.
Thank you very much. Good, thank you. Councillor Rideout, do you have you'd like to start? Does anybody else then have any questions before I go to the two ward members to start the discussion? No, that's lovely. Councillor Rideout.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would be very happy to propose approval of this application, particularly with the conditioned timing of delivery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pothecary.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd be delighted to second the proposal to approve this application. We've waited a long time and it's really encouraging to see things moving forward. Thank you.
Good, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. I've had a proposer and a seconder, which is very helpful. Just before I move to the vote then, is there anybody else who has anything else they'd like to comment? I don't want to cut you short. No, that's excellent. Good. I think we know this site well. We know this application as part of a wider discussion. So we'll move straight to the vote. And just to remind you, members, when I call your name, just indicate that you have heard the whole debate. I don't think anybody's flickered out yet. Okay, so Councillor Andrews, for or against?
For, and I have heard the whole debate.
Thank you. Councillor Cook?
For, and I've heard the whole debate.
Councillor Fry?
For and heard the lot.
Councillor Hall?
For and heard the lot.
Councillor Heatley?
I've heard the whole debate and for.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
For and I've heard everything.
Thank you, Councillor Parker.
For and yes, I heard everything.
Councillor Penfold.
For and I have heard the whole debate.
Councillor Pothecary.
For and I have heard the whole debate.
Councillor Rideout.
For and present throughout.
Good. And is Councillor Taylor with us yet or not? He's not with us. No, okay, that's fine. Well, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. That's nice and businesslike. If we keep zipping through at this rate, we'll have a nice long lunch break. Oh, that was tempting fate, wasn't it? Good. Moving then on to agenda item 5B. This is the same location, and this time it's for the application to form a temporary access for construction traffic during the building of the principal street. As you'll have read the report, you'll understand what that's about. So I will move straight to again Simon McFarlane to present his report. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Am I still sharing? Can you see that?
Not just yet.
Okay, hang on.
We still have the agenda on the.
Simon, can you share your screen again, please?
Yeah, no problem.
That's lovely. Now it's there. Thank you very much, Simon. Good. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, Sherry. This is the similar preamble to the first presentation. This application is in respect of, again, the central section of the site, although it's on the eastern edge, just about here. It's an application for the temporary access to help the council to construct the principal street. So this is the same principal street drawing and an application that was approved several months ago. And if you remember, the principal street application just falls short of connecting to the access to the B road on the eastern side. And the intention is that the subsequent end developer will connect this junction across this separate area of land. So the application before us today is just to provide that temporary access, which we are working with the landowners to gain access to just over this particular part of the site. So the red line boundary again is limited just to this area here. What's on the site at the moment is just an area of unused scrub land with some ruderal vegetation, some low quality trees. The proposed temporary access will form the position of where the end access and the finalised access will be just before the 30-mile-an-hour sign there. The intention is to create the access in accordance with this drawing, which will involve the removal of a certain amount of hedgerow and the creation of these visibility splays. Within the site there'll be a gate which will be operated with a passcode. This will allow vehicles to enter the gate, go through, but it won't allow vehicles to go back out the other way. This is very much going to be a one-way access for construction vehicles only. This is the one-way route for the construction traffic that follows the route of the principal street. And then the construction traffic will access onto Cole Street Lane as a temporary measure, and there will be a turn right only operation down there, so the vehicles will then turn right up to this junction and then make their way out. The intention will be, when the remainder of the principal street is completed to a certain extent and the access is put in on the western end, that the vehicles would then leave in that way. So when the construction is finalised, there is a reinstatement plan that forms part of a condition. Hopefully you received the update that was circulated yesterday. The council have been having discussions with the landowner. That the previous intention was to stop this access up, to reinstate a gate and take away the internal haul road, reseed the area, and pretty much leave it until the development proposals came forward. Discussions with the landowner, who we're working closely with, they have indicated a desire to retain some form of agricultural access into their site, so they might make use of the paddocks either side of this internal haul road in the interim before the main development starts. So we discussed this with Highways and Ecology, and the plan has been amended slightly to create a slightly wider agricultural access that is afforded adequate visibility splays, with a gate that's set back 6 metres from the highway, and then the temporary road that's put in will be left there for the utility of the landowner in the interim. So in conclusion, when all things are considered, the benefits of the temporary access for construction purposes combined with the facilitation of the wider development warrant the approval of this application, and therefore the recommendation is to grant subject to the conditions in the report. And back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Again, Steve Savage, our Highways Transport Development Manager, would you like to comment on the highways aspects of this application?
Certainly would. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. As you've heard, the applicant is proposing a one-way system to be implemented for construction vehicles using the access which is to be formed as part of this application from Shaftesbury Road, and this is going to be the entrance only. The construction access will exit onto Cole Street Lane using the temporary access that was approved as part of the application for the principal street, which also serves as the site compound. There'll be a left turn ban for vehicles emerging from this access, and this will be enforced by site rules and the appropriate traffic management. The intention is then that construction vehicles will travel west for a distance of around 200 metres to the junction with the B3092. As the case officer mentioned, there's a passcode operated barrier installed on Shaftesbury Road to ensure that that entrance is only utilised in a one-way capacity by construction vehicles. Now, the approved construction environmental management plan for the principal street application included the need for the constructor to liaise closely with Dorset Highways prior to and during the construction period regarding the condition of Cole Street Lane to identify any necessary ongoing remedial works. As you've heard, the temporary construction access will be modified upon completion of the principal streets and will become a small-scale agricultural access. This will necessitate the provision of the requisite visibility displays and reduced junction radii, which was on the last plan that you were shown. The visibility displays were coloured pink on it. So bearing in mind the above, I've just mentioned, and subject to a number of conditions, the Highway Authority has no objection to the proposal, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Walsh, did you want to speak again on this item, or your remarks from the previous item stand?
Thank you very much for asking, Chairman, but I don't think I'll insult anybody by repeating what I've already said. I think people know how much local support is for this project, so thank you very much, Chairman. We
were listening. Good, thank you very much. Can I take questions then from member Councillor Fry?
No, I just think this is a needed access, and I'd just like to go straight to the vote on this one.
Okay, are you proposing?
Yes, I am.
Good, okay. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Rideout? I'm sorry, you're...
Yes, I'm here, sorry. Yes, I'd be very happy to second the proposal.
Right. Before I go to the vote then, did you have a comment? Councillor Apothecary, do you have a comment or?
No, Chairman, I was just going to second the vote. Thank you.
To get on. All right, before I go to the vote then, just for courtesy, just give people a moment in case anybody else does have any comment to make. No, that's excellent. Then we will proceed to the vote with this one. Thank you very much. So again, when I call your name, say that you've heard the debate and that whether you for, against or abstain. Councillor Andrews.
For, and I heard the whole debate.
Councillor Cook.
For, and I heard the whole debate.
Councillor Fry.
For, and heard the whole debate.
Councillor Hall.
For, and heard the whole debate.
Councillor Heatley.
For, and heard the whole debate.
Councillor Jones.
For, and heard the whole debate.
Councillor Parker.
For, and heard it all.
Councillor Penfold.
For, and heard the whole debate.
Councillor Apothecary.
For, and I heard the whole debate.
And Councillor Rideout.
For and present throughout.
Lovely, thank you very much. Well, that's passed unanimously. Now, members, I was originally going to take a comfort break at this point, but it seemed a little soon. Is anyone desperate for a comfort break already because you just had too much coffee, or shall we press on? I'm not seeing anybody indicating that they'd like to break, so I think we'll press on then to agenda item 5C. This is an application to build an extra care residential building and to create homes for 55 residents in St Martin Square in Gillingham. And Councillor Apothecary will be leaving the meeting, as in turning her microphone off at this point and not taking part. Could I ask then, Simon, if you would like to present your report, Simon McFarlane? It's very much the Simon McFarlane show this morning because it's all Gillingham. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sherry. Yeah, I'm afraid it's me again, but I promise this is my last item.
You're most welcome.
Okay, am I still sharing? Can you see?
Yes.
Great, thanks for the introduction, Sherry. One thing I'll just add to the description of the development and the development itself, which is important to note, is that the applicant is Magna, that is a registered housing provider. Right, the site location is shown here in the yellow shaded area, just to the north of the main high street and town centre in Gillingham. Good location for extra care type development, being within easy walking distance to the shops and services of the town. This is a zoomed in version of the location plan, so you'll see that the plan shows the buildings that were located on the site that were subject to some controversy several years ago. The St Martin's house to the south, and there was a former vacant care home to the north with a small residential bungalow in the central element of the site. Along the eastern boundary runs a small tributary to the Shreen Water river. It's primarily a residential area, so it's well suited to the proposal. Some photographs of the buildings that were on site that were demolished back in 2019. This is St Martin's house, quite a substantial red brick and red tile building with quite a large parking area. To the north of the site was a two-storey care home that was vacant at the time. Worth noting on this picture, the cherry tree, quite a focal feature of the site, which is being retained in the current proposals. This is the view of the central area of the site, where you can see just in the distance a small residential bungalow. This is the site today, looking quite sorry for itself, currently been vacant for several years now, detracting slightly from the character and appearance of the area, and the site's fenced off. So this is the view looking down Queen Street towards the town. This is the view from within the site, looking south towards St Mary's Church in the foreground. Just worth noting the location of this outbuilding, which is within the curtilage of the adjacent property to the south here, Lime Tree Cottage, which is a listed building. This is the view looking north along Queen Street. Just worth noting some of the varying scales of the building. We've got some two-storey properties, some 2.5, and some quite substantial sort of 3-storey elements. So I just want to be clear that the next 2 or 3 slides are iterations of the plans that don't really form part of the application anymore. The plans have since been significantly revised, but I just wanted to take you through the journey of where we've been and where we've got to. So this was the first iteration of the site plan when the application was submitted back in 2018. You'll see a sort of C-shaped site plan, 2 accesses, communal parking area to the south, landscaped areas and internal courtyards to the rear. Quite an unrelenting flat sort of elevation to the front, addressing the street. This would have involved the loss of the focal cherry tree here. And just moving through to the elevations of the plans, it was considered at this time that this proposal, almost entirely 3 stories with poor articulation, bulky, generally unsympathetic to the character of the area, was not going to be supported. There was quite strong objection from the Conservation Officer and from Historic England. These are the rear elevations, flat roof, full 3-storey rear internal elevations, quite unrelenting, monolithic, poor use of a palette of materials. So the applicant worked very well, and in consultation with the Conservation Officer and planning officers, has significantly revised these plans, which has resulted in the application that's before you today that I'll go on to describe now. So this is the application that's before you today. This is the revised proposed site plan. The overall number of units has been reduced from 60 down to 55. You see it forms now a H plan, with the focal cherry tree retained in a courtyard to the front, with a private courtyard landscaped area to the rear, still utilising the similar location of the existing accesses to the north for refuse and servicing, and to the south for a communal parking area for 31 spaces for the 55 flats. Large area of landscape grounds to the rear, down to the river's edge, which would be quite pleasant. And the most affected properties are really the Lime Tree Cottage to the south, and Portland Bungalows and number 3 Queen Street to the north. So this is probably the most principal elevation, the west elevation that faces onto Queen Street and St Martin's Square. The top drawing is a zoomed in version of the bottom drawing, which shows a slightly wider street scene elevation. Things to note, this is the outline of the former care home, and this is the outline of the former St Martin's house. So whilst overall we've got a bigger built form proposed on site than what was there previously, it has pulled away from both of those adjoining properties to the north and the south in terms of distance, commensurate height, sort of overall height to in comparison to St Martin's, slightly higher but further away towards Portland Bungalows. Consider that these revisions are a significant improvement to the earlier iterations. The front wings have been dropped to 2 stories, and the applicant has agreed to change the roof material to provide a contrast between slate to the 2-storey wings and plain red tiles to the larger elements set further back into the site. Overall, the level of articulation, the detailing, the gables, the varying in ridge heights proposed alongside high quality materials that will all be conditioned, really represent a building that now fits in a lot better with the character of the area, and I think represents high quality design. This is the north elevation, looking down towards Gillingham, down Queen Street. You'll see the extent of the 2-storey element to the front, and then the 2.5, 3-storey element to the rear, with the flats to the rear having balconies to take advantage of the views over the river. This is the south elevation looking north away from Gillingham town. Again, the 2-storey element to the front. This is the central entrance of the communal parking area to the south. Just worth noting, quite a nice feature of a 2nd floor central atrium that runs the length of the building, and then 2.5-storey, 3-storey to the rear with balconies to the back. This is the rear elevation, entirely 3-storey, and with balconies wherever possible, providing a pleasant outlook for residents. and some internal courtyard elevations. So I've got several computer generated images of the building. It's just worth bearing in mind that these haven't been updated to reference the change in roof material to the front. So what we'll have moving forward in the future is these elements will be in slate grey here and here, and then the rest of the building will be a plain red tile. And we thought that this really helped with the breaking up the mass of the building. This is the view looking from St Martin's Square towards the building. This is the main entrance to the communal parking area. Again, the atrium to the entrance area here. And this is the view Portland Bungalows to the north of the site here, with a secondary access to service the refuse store in this location. And some artistic views of the rear of the development, where there'll be a professionally landscaped grounds and internal private courtyard area for residents to sit in the summer months. I just run through the floor plans. I think it's an important point to note is that there's a necessity for a development of this nature with an extensive amount of communal facilities to be located within one building, both for ease of access to these facilities and for security purposes. So this is the ground floor plan. We've got our main entrance here, and the green areas are the communal spaces. So we've got a reception area, we've got lodge manager's office, we've got a well-being area for treatments, haircuts, physiotherapy. We've got dining area, we've got activity rooms, TV rooms, mobility scooter store, refuse store here on the left, and a couple of mobility scooter store with an entrance coming off here, and a separate shopper's entrance here. The red or pinky areas are the 2 beds, and the blue area here are the 1 beds. So there's 44 1 beds and 11 2 beds, 55 in total. This is the first floor plan. So flats contained around a single central corridor, which gives a good variety of outlooks and an efficient building type. This is the second floor. Just worth noting here that this area in green is a guest suite, so family members, relatives, friends can come and stay. Laundry area here for probably members of staff, and the central atrium element here with seating area to look over. Finally, the roof plan. Okay, so one of the key considerations in this case is the heritage assets. The drawing here shows the site's location. The purple line is the extent of the Gillingham Town Centre conservation area. So the site is located outside of that area, but within its setting and quite close to it. On the left here is the listed buildings. So we've got Lime Tree House, one to the north in Queen Street, and several around St Martin's Square, and of course St Mary's Church. Due to the significant revisions and what we feel now is an acceptable scheme, there's no objections from Historic England or the Conservation Officer. It is acknowledged that there is some less than substantial harm identified to the setting of Lime Tree House by the virtue of having a larger building set back within its setting, and this harm has to be given great weight in the planning balance. But upon careful consideration, overall, it's been considered that the public benefits of this proposal for extra care and affordable housing outweigh this harm, and I'll go into those benefits in a few slides. Worth noting, the site does fall within a flood risk area, so this blue line here outlines the extent of the extreme flood zones due to location next to the river. The applicant has submitted a sequential test, which is required by national planning policy. They've made an assessment of similar sites within the town to form an assessment to conclude that there are no other available sites of this size, of this nature, that are available and deliverable at lower area of flood risk. They've also sequentially located the building, so the built footprint and all of the accommodation is located well away from the floodplain. There's only a small area of car parking which falls within the extent of the flood zones, and it will be possible to raise the levels slightly in those areas to mitigate that harm. So I touched a little earlier on the two properties that are to the north and the south of the site being the most affected by this proposal. So I'll just go into our assessment on the amenity of those residents here. So the distances of the proposed building, corner to corner, 21 metres, and we've got 27 metres from the corner of the 2.5 three-storey element to the corner of Lime Tree House, and 11.3 and 10.5 metres further back into the site, and a slight mitigating factor to lessen the impact here is this is quite a significant outbuilding. So given the range of separation distances, the intervening access road, the opportunity for planting and the parking areas, we feel that overall, whilst there will be a change to the setting, overall this doesn't warrant the refusal of the planning application, and we think the amenity of those residents will not be adversely affected. There is a concern that's been noted by the residents of Lime Tree House and the Town Council in respect to the location of the proposed substation, which is located here, quite close to the boundary wall. We asked the applicants to carry out an exercise to see if there was another more appropriate location in the site, and they provided this drawing which demonstrates that there really isn't. The red areas indicate surface and foul sewer easements along the access roads where you can't have built form. That the frontage area is visually prominent and quite sensitive. To the rear of the site, it's mainly floodplain or ecology buffer zones. So it really down to a process of elimination. This is the most suitable location with access for vehicles to a substation. What we've done is proposed a planning condition which requires details of the substation to be located, and made it clear to the applicants that this must be a brick enclosed substation with a slate tile roof to respect the setting of the listed building and the character of the area. This will also hopefully mitigate any concerns with regard to sort of undue noise from the substation. So both the noise impact and the appearance of this will be conditioned and agreed in consultation with the conservation officer. And so just touching on the property to the north, again, we have some sort of adequate distances in our opinion. 19 metres from this element here, the 2.5 storey to the corner of number 1 and 3 Queen Street, and 12.5 metres to the boundary, with some opportunities for planting to mitigate the impact. And also worth noting that the black dotted line here was the extent of the previous former care home, and whilst the building is taller, it is set back probably about another 5 or 6 metres. So overall, it's considered to be acceptable. So in terms of section 106 obligations, we've agreed a set of heads of terms with the applicant, Magna, and in terms of affordable housing, they're providing, well, let's start. Their intention is to provide this development as 100% social rented. However, we're only going to be able to legally secure 25% on site through the legal agreement. That is because that is the only amount that is necessary and would meet the tests set out in the community infrastructure levy regulations. Also, the applicant benefits from additional funding by not securing 100% within the legal agreement. So if they secure 25%, the rest of the 75% that could in theory be market dwellings, if they convert that into social rented affordable housing, that they benefit in terms of funding, so therefore making the 100% provision more likely. So there's a firm commitment working in joint partnership with the council as the landowner to provide this as 100% affordable, but it must be clear that the members should only take into account in the planning balance that there's 25% legally going to be provided. There's community facility contributions for the Riversmeet Leisure Centre, additional cemetery provision, libraries, and a contribution towards the Garden of Remembrance refurbishment. So some of the benefits that I discussed slightly earlier that are used in the balance to outweigh that identified less than substantial heritage harm, and in consideration of the overall case are the regeneration of a derelict site that currently detracts from the area, delivery of important extra care and affordable housing, which are both in significant need in Dorset, savings to the NHS through specialist housing that better suits older people's needs. It's been evidenced that people moving into these types of accommodation often have less need for hospital visits because they're living in more secure, safe, purpose-built accommodation. They experience improvements to the well-being of residents through companionship and the safety and security of this new managed accommodation. In turn, this often results in the release of underoccupied properties in the locality where residents have previously lived in 3 and 4 bedroom properties, freeing them up for younger people. It results in a reduction in the need to travel by car by virtue of the site being in a very sustainable location within relatively flat level walking distance of the shops and services. The town centre will benefit from increased spending and support the local shops and services through regular visits by residents, and there'll also be benefits in temporary construction jobs and also permanent jobs created within the development moving forward. So in conclusion, the site's in a great location for this type of development within the settlement boundary. The principle's acceptable. The provision of 55 dwellings with 25% affordable will provide a good choice of housing at a time when the council can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The presumption in favour of development therefore applies. There are significant economic, social benefits and some environmental benefits, and the identified less than substantial harm is outweighed by these public benefits. We have 106 that secures all the necessary planning obligations, and overall there's no adverse impacts that we think would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the National Planning Policy Framework taken as a whole. So this case accords with the development plan, and there are no considerations or specific policies that weigh against the balance, and we think that it should be approved without further delay. Therefore, the recommendation is to delegate authority to the head of planning to grant permission subject to the 106 to address the 25% affordable housing, community facilities and informal outdoor space, and the conditions at the end of the report. And with a recommendation B that the application is refused permission if we fail to secure those stated obligations in a legal agreement, and that's not completed before the 23rd of September, or such time as to be agreed by the head of planning. Thank you, Chair. Back to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. That's an excellent report, very, very clearly presented. So thank you for that. I seem to have a strange echo. I hope it will sort itself out. Steve Savage, for highways, would you like to discuss the highways implications of this application?
Sorry, Chair, we can't hear you properly. I think it's Simon's mic that's on. That's a comment.
Yes. Simon, could you mute? Oh, he's all right now. Yes, he's still. I'll say that again then. I'm Steve Savage. Would you like to present the highways implications of this application for us? Thank you.
Well, thank you. Simon, would it be possible to put the proposed site plan up on the... That's the one.
I'll just go back a second. Hang on.
Okay, the existing northern access that you can see on the plan there, which serves the access from Queen Street, is to be used, as you've heard, for service vehicles and provides access to the waste transfer room and the bin storage area. The applicant has provided a swept path analysis for a refuse collection vehicle to ensure that such a vehicle can enter and exit the site in a forward gear. The existing southern access from St Martin's Square provides access to the car parking area that you can see shown there in a dark grey and a browny colour. The parking area, as Simon mentioned, will provide 31 car parking spaces on site, and these are to be used by visitors, staff and residents. 5 bays are dedicated, as you can see just to the right of the entrance, you go in for the disabled spaces. The highway authorities are of the opinion that the on-site car parking provision is appropriate for a location such as this, which is deemed to be sustainable within easy access to a range of local services and amenities within the town centres of the south. And as Simon also showed you, there's a mobility scooter parking area provided within the building, very easy access from the front of the front elevation. The trip generation, projected trip generation from the site is predicted to be no more than 20 two-way trips in the AM peak, which is between 8 and 9 AM, 10 two-way trips in the PM peak between 5 and 6. It's worth noting that due to a lack of data for extra care facilities on tricks, which is what is utilised to provide the predictions, the worst case scenario which has been provided by the applicant is based on retirement flats. So the figures I just gave you, these are the worst case scenario. I think in reality, extra care facilities do tend to generate less vehicular movements than this. So if you could just bear that in mind, it should be less than 20 in the morning and less than 2 in the evening peak. It should also be, Simon, would it be possible to go to the CAD drawing which showed the southernmost access, please? It should be noted that the existing local highway network in the vicinity of the site is traffic calmed by physical measures. You can see a junction plateau just to the left of the drawing there, which is obviously in situ. Junction plateaus along this section of the highway and then up Queen Street itself serve to keep vehicle speeds at, I think it's well below 20 miles per hour, to be fair. You've got a very wide footway along the frontage, as you can see, which flares out as it goes in a northern direction past the site. Now, this footway is well used by parents and children accessing the primary school particularly, but also the secondary school. We have recognised this, and as you'll see on that particular drawing, there's a 0.45 metre high timber knee rail which has been provided, which obviously improves dramatically the visibility over the existing access, which has a brick wall on either side. So having borne all these points in mind, Madam Chair, and the trip generation, the location of the site, etc., the Highway Authority has recommended a conditional approval. Thank you.
Yeah. Very, very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Now we have a number of representations to hear on this one. First, we're going to hear from Jill and Kate White, who are objecting, and then Adam Fitzgerald, who is Dorset Council's programme manager for the Building Better Lives programme, who's going to speak in support, and then we're going to hear, I think, from the ward member, Councillor David Walsh, and then finally the applicant. So who is our reader for today?
Hello, Madam Speaker. It's Jill Whitney again.
Hello, Jill. Thank you very much. Right, over to you. You've got one or two to read, so we're listening carefully. Thank you very much, Jill.
Okay, not a problem at all. Okay, so as Madam Speaker said, this is Jim and Kate White against the application. We understand that the above application will come before Dorset Council Planning on Tuesday the 23rd of March, and as owners of the adjacent property, Lime Tree House, we would be grateful if the committee could give consideration to our comments below. We have reviewed the latest documentation and plans. Although we accept that the most recent plans are more sympathetic to the site than the previous design, there are still a number of important issues that we believe the committee should give serious consideration to. The electricity substation is currently positioned in the corner of the adjoining wall in close proximity to our house and abutting the boundary wall, which is in the conservation area. From the site plan, it looks as though it is approximately 4 metres by 4 metres, which is very large. It is only 9 metres from the back corner of our Grade 2 listed house. The substation would impinge on the view from our property and create undue noise. Therefore, we would request that this be moved to an alternative site away from the listed house wall and the boundary of the conservation area. 2. We now realise why the proposed building seemed smaller than before. This is because the new plans have only 2 stories on the street side, west elevation, but 3 stories on the south side where it overlooks our garden. This would have a detrimental impact on the current view from our garden and the view from the town centre. We would be grateful if consideration could be given to lowering the level of the eastern end of the development to avoid this. It could have a further advantage that it reduces the number of steps from the building for elderly residents. 3. Document 6732/15, Senior Conservation Officer specifically mentions concern regarding the bricks and tiles to be used in the building's construction, and paragraph 3 mentions our boundary wall. Please note we already have a legal agreement on the repair of this wall, only part of which has been completed by Dorset Council. We were slightly alarmed to see the wall described on the site plan as being constructed of brick when it is clearly constructed of stone and is an integral part of the historic fabric of the listed building at Lime Tree House. This is a very large development which we believe does not sit happily on this site, and we trust that the Planning Committee will ensure that every effort is made to protect St Martin's Square and the historic and listed buildings adjoining it. Now I will read comments from Adam Fitzgerald, Programme Manager for Building Better Lives, who supports the application. The development of the St Martin's Extra Care Housing Scheme has been consistently supported by Dorset Council Commissioners over the course of the last 4 years. This site offers an excellent location for extra care housing, giving people an opportunity to live in the heart of their town in purpose-built accommodation designed to enable them to continue living independently as they age. Its proximity to the high street and other amenities is a great opportunity for people to keep active and engaged in life within the town. Development of extra care housing is a key strategic objective for adult services as an alternative and replacement to more traditional and less enabling forms of care, such as residential care homes. The pressures that population growth of over 65-year-olds and rising prevalence of dementia drives a need for more extra care housing across Dorset. This would represent the first such scheme in Gillingham. And we have comments now from Daniel Knight, KSA Architects Limited.
Can I just interrupt you? We hear first from the ward member, Councillor David Walsh, if he's with us, and then we go on to the agent. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. I wish, as I did with the first two applications on the Southern Extension, I could say that the whole of the town has been behind this project from the very start. They haven't. It was the demolition of St Martin's which became quite divisive, and it did divide the town. And I lost friends over that. I've always supported this being an extra care facility, but I understand other people's passion in wanting to keep the St Martin's building. And it's not a case of, well, that's gone now, so let's move on. It isn't that very much at all. But I would like to look, this is a brownfield site now as we speak. And as we've said to all Dorset residents through the local plan that we've just been doing on the consultation, we'll always use brownfield sites as opposed to greenfield sites. And I would like to say that the first plans that came forward from the applicant were not seen or supported by the residents of Gillingham. They were not thought that was very good. And since the submission of the first iteration of the proposals in 2018, a great deal of work has been carried out. And the plans have been revised significantly in consultation with the council's planning officers, and in particular, the conservation officer, hugely important. The revised proposals have resulted in a reduction to 55 units and have now been designed to better reflect the surrounding context and setting. The latest proposals have been reduced in height, site coverage, and stepped further away from both the north and south boundaries. The front wings of the buildings have been reduced to 2 stories in height, with the buildings then stepping up to 2.5 and 3 stories in height, further back into the site. The inclusion of future gables, variation in eaves and ridge heights, recesses, and using a mixture of high quality materials, including grey slate and red plain roof tiles and red brick with detailing, these changes were all necessary to address concerns in relation to the initial proposals. Over the last 3 years, I think the applicants have done everything they could to create a well-articulated development that respects and responds positively to the surrounding context. Overall, it is considered that the development has been designed to respect the character and quality of the area within which it is located. But please bear in mind, members, there will be significant social and economic benefits weighing in favour of the proposal. The regeneration of a derelict site, as I've said, delivery of extra care and affordable housing in a sustainable location, which is very much needed, saving the NHS through specialist housing and better suits older people needs, improvements to the well-being of residents living through companionship and the safety and security of purpose-built managed accommodation, the release of under-occupied properties in the locality, which we are desperate for. It is a sustainable location within walking distance of shops and services, cutting down the need for car journeys. There will be increased spending and support of the local shops and services within the town through regular visits by residents. Very importantly, it must be recognised that the applicant is a registered housing provider, as Simon says, and is committed to the council to deliver the development as 100% social renting housing. You've heard why we can only say 25%. So just to clarify, the proposal is located within the settlement boundary. The proposal is for a type of housing in significant need. The council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The proposal would contribute towards the council's 5-year housing land supply. And paragraph 11 of the National Planning Policy Framework sets out that permission should be granted for sustainable development unless specific policies in the NPPF indicate otherwise. None have been identified. The development would secure economic and social benefits. And importantly, as you've read, there are no material planning considerations which would warrant refusal of this application. I just hope that if we can do something good with this site, then it might bring the town back together. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Walsh. Jill, could we now hear the representations from the applicant's agent?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
So again, this is Daniel Knight, KSA Architects Limited. Thank you, Chair. The proposal is for a 55-unit extra care scheme providing desperately needed affordable elderly accommodation in Gillingham, where an increase of those aged 65 and over is expected to rise by 47% between 2011 and 2035, defined by Dorset CC in December 2018. The proposal is brought forward by Magna Housing, a registered social landlord, working with the local authority to address this need. The redevelopment of this site has undergone significant change since its first submission in October 2018. The previous scheme comprised a part 2 to 3 storey building with linear facade fronting onto St Martin's Square. The rear of the building was 3 storeys in height with a flat roof. The scheme was met with objections from both statutory consultees and members of the public concerning various technical issues and its relationship with the neighbouring conservation area. In May 2019, a new scheme was commissioned to address these concerns. Comments from Historic England and the Conservation Officer were considered, and the design team worked with a historic buildings consultant to address these. The latest proposal is a departure from the original scheme. The layout now follows an H plan, framing an area of open space at the front with retained cherry tree as the focal point, similar to the original built form. To the rear, an open courtyard with views out over the Shreen Water and new wildflower meadow is proposed. Technical issues around flood risk, drainage, highways and ecology have all been addressed. Following recent amendments to the front elevation, reducing the scheme from 60 to 55 units, the application is now supported by the Conservation Officer and Historic England. It is noted that Gillingham Town Council have been consulted throughout the design process and resolved to support the earlier 60-unit scheme. Their latest objection has been raised on a proposal where the bulk and scale of the building has been significantly reduced and is at odds with the view of both Historic England and Conservation Officer. Extra care, with its associated communal facilities and level of support required, needs to achieve a critical mass in which to be financially viable in both capital delivery terms and in the ongoing management / care provision for the scheme. The proposed 55-unit scheme is on the margins of viability, but Magna remain committed to its delivery. A further reduction of units or continued delay to the project would cast doubt on the deliverability of this scheme. We therefore respectfully ask members of this committee to take an on-balance view to this application, where high quality, sustainable, affordable and much needed elderly extra care accommodation is proposed, and following the Planning Officer's recommendation to approve this scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. Before I turn now to members' questions, could I ask Simon, would you like to respond to or comment on the point that was made in Mr. and Mrs. Whitney's, Mr. and Mrs. White's representation about the location of the substation? They raised that specific question.
Yeah, sure, Sherry. I'll just go back to the pertinent plan. Yeah, this is the location of the substation here. Now, I understand their concerns in terms of its proximity, but I think the condition that we've applied and suggested that requires details of that substation, and those details are only going to be acceptable if it's going to be a brick enclosed, so the brick to match the proposed building with detailing with a slate roof. That is really the only good form of structure that's going to be acceptable, which will create a visually acceptable substation enclosure, which will also mitigate any sort of noise concerns. And we really did go to some lengths with the applicant to explore if there was another appropriate location for the substation. Given the constraints on the site, it was demonstrated to our satisfaction that this really was the only viable location for it. So so overall, with the condition, with the control of how it's going to appear, with the mitigation in terms of the soundproofing that the brick enclosure will create, overall we're satisfied that we've made the best out of it that we can in order to protect the amenity of those neighbouring residents.
Thank you very much. That's helpful to clear that up. Members, I have a list of you wanting to ask some questions. So, Councillor Andrews first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So my questions reside to the car parking, and are there any planned points for charging for electric vehicles? Also, do you as an officer believe there's enough car parking spaces? Because we've seen that in our town, where it's supposed to be sustainable and just causes clogs in the street. 31 for 55 residences doesn't seem enough to me. Car parking for the visitors. So you said there's a visitors room there that they can stay overnight in. Are there specific car parks for that? Mobility scooter charging storage facilities, will that have charging points in it? And the last question is, there is a lift, isn't there, in the building? That's it.
Two. Yes. Simon, would you respond to those questions?
Yeah, perhaps I can respond, and then perhaps Steve may wish to back me up.
Yes.
So car parking, in terms of the charging points, we negotiated with the applicants by condition that 50% of the spaces would be provided with the appropriate infrastructure to allow charging points to be inserted in the future. We did discuss having charging points conditioned immediately, but I think you might have heard in the representation that the scheme is finally balanced in terms of viability. So as demand increases for these types of spaces in the future, there will be the facilities to put them in. And in the absence of a specific local planning policy to secure them, we thought that was quite a good negotiation.
Can I just ask, is that for charging for cars or for mobility vehicles, scooters?
I was going to come on to that, Jerry. But,
so that's extra information. So that's, we've got 50% of the car parking spaces can be upgraded to have facilities for charging points. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you. Carry on.
And I'll move forward to the scooter points. Yes, there will be charging internally within the building in the mobility scooter store for the scooters. There's also a small scooter store on some of the upper floors as well, which will allow those members of the development that have difficulty walking to access the lift in their scooters and take it fairly close to where they live. Just touching on the lifts, there is 2 lifts provided within the building to all floors, one on the northern section and one near the communal entrance to the south. And in terms of enough car parking spaces, my previous role before working for the council was I spent the last 10 years working for retirement housing providers. So I've got a great deal of experience in these types of developments, and I can say with some great confidence that 31 spaces for visitors, staff and residents will be more than sufficient in a good location like this. All the evidence at many appeals has backed that up, and I actually think this is quite a generous provision, if I'm honest. So hopefully that answers the questions. Steve, do you want to add anything?
Through you, Chair, just to reiterate, I agree with Simon with regards to the car parking which is to be provided. I think it's important to note that these are extra care units, so the likelihood of the residents having a high take-up of car ownership is very low. So it's primarily looking at visitors and staff. We'd be encouraging the staff to utilise alternative modes of transport where they can. We've suggested that there's a cycle parking scheme needs to be submitted to encourage people to cycle to their workplace as well. And it is a town centre location, so I don't think we could ever sustain any form of refusal based on 31 car parking spaces for a development of this size is the bottom line as far as I'm concerned. And again, it's a generous provision in my experience of doing this for a few more years than Simon probably has. So yes, I think we're okay with the car parking.
Yeah, good. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Councillor Hall, your question.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just slightly follow on firstly on this car parking issue, can I ask whether any assessment was done either by the council or by the applicant to come up with this 31? As in, have they made an assessment that that's how many car parking spaces they need, or if they fitted in the amount that there is space for? I understand what both the officers are saying, but a sustainable location might lead to reduction in car journeys, but it doesn't necessarily mean reduction in car ownership. Also, if we're talking about extra care facilities, my understanding now is that if a resident needs the use of a hoist, then that takes 2 members of staff, then that's 2 cars, then you don't need an awful lot of those scenarios. So in my mind, 31 spaces isn't enough, but I would like to know if some form of assessment has been done. The second question is, and you mentioned cycling to work, but I didn't see any specifics on the plan about a cycle park, you know, an area where people could store bicycles. And the third question, and I don't know whether this is a planning matter or not, but on page 50, it refers to the minimum age requirement for these units as being 55. And it was just, where does the age 55 come from? And if it is a couple, does that age requirement cover them both, or does it just cover one? Thank you.
Yes, there are answers to all of those questions. Can I go back to who wants to start off? Well, first of all, the cycle parking provision, Simon, that's there, isn't it?
Yes, we have a planning condition which requires details to be submitted. Obviously, given the age of the intended occupants, it's not envisaged that there'll be a really high provision. It would be more for friends, relatives, visitors, members of staff, so likely to involve some Sheffield stands somewhere within the hard landscaping and the parking area for several bicycles. I'll just touch on the age point. Yes, and perhaps I'll go back to Steve on the transport statement and the parking provision. The minimum age is 55, so that would include couples as well as single occupants. I think it's really important to note, although that seems fairly young, it's likely, and in my sort of experience with these developments, the average age is going to be more like sort of 79, 80, and it's going to be people with some element of care needs, and that have moved to this type of accommodation because of a situation in their lives through illness or through some sort of event that requires them to have a more specialised accommodation. That the car ownership of these types of people really drops off, and all the evidence and the statistics that I've ever been made aware of and presented at appeals, public inquiries, shows that the level of parking provided here, 31 spaces for 55 residents, should really be sufficient. But I'll pass on to Steve to touch on that point again.
Steve, thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I think the important point to bear in mind is that the applicant has suggested that operationally these are the number of spaces that are required. And as Simon very eloquently put there, in appeal scenarios, when we've tested this with the inspectorate, they do tend to work to the operational needs of the site. The developer needs to provide what they feel is appropriate in the location that they're putting the development in. I think the other point to bear in mind is that car parking in the immediate vicinity of the site in St Martin's Square and Queen Street itself is very limited with regards to any on-street provision for any length of time. But there are car parks, public car parks, in relatively close proximity to the site. There are at least 2 which are within a 5 to perhaps 10-minute maximum walk from the site. So for visitors who are come to visit relatives and friends or whatever in here, there are other alternatives to park. I don't think that the car parking numbers, if there was ever proven to be a problem, I don't think that it would lead to obstruction of the adjacent highway or any particular amenity issue, because there is nowhere else to park in close proximity. But I really do feel that the important point here is that the operational requirement has been identified by the applicant. We're satisfied as a highway authority that that is sufficient for a development of this size, and I take on board Councillor Hall's comments regarding other locations. I feel that in this location, this is a sufficient provision, and that's the recommendation that we're making to your members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And members,
can I come back, Sherry, please?
You may indeed. Just keep in mind, members, that this is an extra care home. Yeah. An extra care home that we're talking about here, and that is a very specific type of accommodation. Councillor Hall, come back.
Thank you, Steve, for mentioning the operational requirements. That's what I was trying to get at. The second point, Simon, can I just tease out this 55, please? I'll give you an example which my wife will probably give me a frown at. My wife is 55, I am 44. If she needed to be in a situation where she needed to go into this, could we move there, bearing in mind that I'm 44? That's what I'm trying to find out.
Okay, yeah, understood. No is the answer, really. The minimum age is 55, and it's not just the age requirement that you'd have to meet. There's also an assessment of care needs that would need to be taken out by the council and by the applicant, Magna. So you wouldn't meet the requirements, I would guess, in terms of care needs or age. So yeah, the reality is that people residing here are more likely to be in their 70s and 80s and 90s. There is, I just touch on it, the condition does allow, at the request of the applicant, to allow up to I think it's 3 flats for people that are actually younger than 55, because on occasion they do have the situation where someone is in quite acute need of care and specialised accommodation. So we thought that, given that's such a small number that doesn't materially alter the character and nature of the scheme, that's acceptable. But 52 out of the 55 units will be more elderly people.
That's helpful. Does that satisfy you, Councillor Hall? You getting a picture here?
Yes, it does, and I apologise for the officer. I didn't see that part within the report. Sorry.
Yes, that's good. Thank you very much. No, not at all. It's good to probe these things. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a couple of questions. Firstly, I think maybe following on from the discussion that's already been had about the eligibility requirements, it's been mentioned within the reasons for approval, or reasons for considering to approve this, that there will be a benefit to the local community in that properties will become available that from being owned by people who have moved into this specialist accommodation. Can I tease out the eligibility? Will that be in any way given priority or weight to those within a specific local area? Or will it? Are you considering that the applicants for accommodation here will be from the wider Dorset, or from Gillingham, or from somewhere in between? The second question I've got is on the building materials. If you possibly, Simon, could we go back to the frontage? Or the view of the frontage that's being proposed.
Could I suggest we deal with your eligibility question first before we talk about materials, because that links to the discussion before. Simon, do you want to just, as I understand it, the eligibility, this will be hopefully this will be administered by Magna Housing, who are one of our registered social landlords. So the expectation is that the eligibility criteria will be those agreed between Dorset Council and Magna Housing, people who qualify for extra care housing on the housing register. So they obviously there is a local a requirement, a priority given to local residents on our own register, but it's not it's not the top criteria. The top criteria is need, and so I think in this context, when we say local, we mean Dorset wide. Is that right, Simon?
Sherry, yeah, I think you've summed that up very well. In the section 106, there's a set of criteria which involves a local connection that does mean district, sort of Dorset wide. Mm-hmm. So that would allow residents from Shaftesbury or any other town or village to move into a location like this. I think in reality, the majority of the people will be either from Gillingham or Shaftesbury or nearby, but there is an allowance for wider people. But it will be down to, like you said, the housing needs register and a collaboration between the council and the registered provider.
Quite. And of course, in terms of that freeing up housing, wherever these residents move from, and if they have a house to that they then put out either to sell or that they were renting a previous affordable home, that's all to the good, because we have a housing shortage right across Dorset. So it's not just in Gillingham. If they're freeing up property in Gillingham, that's a social benefit. It's wherever, frankly, property is being freed up in Dorset that would apply. So does that satisfy you on that part of the question, Councillor Cook?
Yes, I think so. It is that benefit to the wider community that yes, as you say, the freeing up of properties. But what I was hoping that we could possibly refrain from is people coming in from outside of Dorset, and therefore Dorset residents in general aren't going to feel as much benefit or get as much benefit from this.
No, this is a registered social landlord working with Dorset Council, so this will be for Dorset, for people on the Dorset housing register. So that's comforts you there. Can we move on then to Councillor Cook's question? I interrupt you, Councillor, on the materials.
Yes, just looking at that specific portion of the development that is directly behind the cherry tree, that two kind of M-shaped elevation that looks as though it's rendered. I don't know whether that material is supposed to be render or is just an artistic impression of what the building will look like. But can I strongly suggest that render is not the material that part of the building is fronted with, because not only are we coming down from that is the first view of that development that people are going to see. I've seen too many developments in the last few years in the surrounding area where we've got an either a beige or an orangey render which has gone horribly discoloured. And specifically a development up the road to Salisbury from Shaftesbury, and also if you come along Le Newbourg Way and look at the developments fronting out to the the right hand side opposite the station, there are renders that have gone discoloured over what, 2 or 3 years, 5 years maximum. I would hate to see that as a focal point for when you're coming directly towards it from the Le Newbourg Way turn-off. Thank you, Chair.
Simon, is that render?
No, hopefully I can allay your concerns. The intention is that would be grey brick with red brick detailing.
Brilliant.
And yeah, no render. And then just to reiterate that all of the materials, the detailing in regard to the windows, the dormers, the downpipes, the reveals, is all secured by planning conditions. So notwithstanding the plans, we'll be having further detailed discussions in consultation with the conservation officer when these plans come forward to discharge conditions.
Is that coming back to us for a decision on, or is the materials being considered going to be wrapped up with what we're doing today?
Yes, Simon.
I don't believe that the details of the conditions will will come back to committee. So it's really down to today and the conditions that are imposed on the application.
It is usual that when materials are conditioned, as they are in this case, that's then a discussion between the planning office and the applicant, where the applicant is required to show precisely what brick and what slate is being used, and that is checked at that stage, so that there's no, as it were, slippage, and different materials are used. So that's conditioned. Are you happy, Councillor Cook? Good. Councillor Rideout, you have a couple of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Simon, hello. A couple of questions. First of all, we're going to the elevation drawings for the north and the south, in particular the balconies. The north elevation shows the balconies clear, the south elevation shows them sort of filled in. Could you just confirm, is that intended on the south elevation?
So this is the south elevation and that is the north elevation. I think that's just a change in colour on the two respective plans. I think the intention that is on these plans that again would be secured by condition is that there'd be glass balustrading to the sides of those balconies.
I see. I'm asking this question with reference to neighbouring amenity. I suppose if people are sat out there so that they can't be seen from any neighbours.
Yeah, let's go to the site plan. I think it was considered because the balconies are going to be here and here, they're quite far back into the site with, and the most likely place that residents are going to be sitting and looking is sort of straight out towards the to the rear of the site, rather than sort of peering directly into the neighbouring properties. So that wasn't considered to be sort of an adverse issue at the time of consideration. There could be, with the conditions, a condition imposed to secure some privacy screens to the side of those balconies to allay that concern, which would just mean that the glass balustrading is increased in height to obscure views.
Yes, please. I think that would be beneficial for neighbours. Thank you. And my second question relates to condition 14, soft landscaping. The scheme shall include provision for the maintenance and replacement as necessary of trees and shrubs for a period of not less than 5 years. So, for clarification, does that mean in perpetuity?
I suppose no, it means 5 years, but in reality, this is going to be a managed development with a management company, and there'll be an element of service charge. So it's fully hoped that and expected that this development be kept looking neat and tidy, and that the requisite planting and gardens and trees will be kept to a high standard.
Yeah, and again, of course, I'm asking this for neighbouring amenity to give them a bit of privacy and make sure it's the trees and landscaping is kept up. Is there any room for more robust landscaping on that southern boundary with Lime Tree House? And the cluster of trees down in that bottom left-hand corner adjacent to Lime Tree House, do they include evergreens, do you know?
The type and the species of the trees is yet to be decided, so that will come forward in the conditions discharge information. But there is some opportunity in this location to have some planting that would mitigate some of the relationship with the new development, and there's room for some planting, a thin strip along the boundary here.
Yes, yeah, but if it could be fairly robust planting, it's not really going to overshadow anything given the orientation apart from the car park.
Yeah.
Is the sorry, I interrupt you, Councillor. Can I just probe on this? So is the planting there to mitigate the relationship with the neighbouring property, is that already in the conditions specifically? Have we made?
I think overall, Sherry, the planting is not an absolute requirement to mitigate the impact on residential amenity, but planting will be conditioned, so there can be a consideration to the detail and the location of trees in that regard. But in my view, if you weren't to plant any trees to that boundary, it wouldn't mean that the impact was then so adverse that it would warrant a different decision.
I understand, and of course it doesn't. I think what Councillor Rideout is, it doesn't have to be trees. It just has to be planting that's good enough to do the job, doesn't it? That's the point. So, but the planting is conditioned, is it?
It is, yes.
Yes, good. Now, and the maintenance, we put our standard condition in where it should be maintained for 5 years. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so.
There isn't any reason to suppose that it wouldn't be maintained. This would be Magna Housing's property, and they would want to maintain it. But I just wonder if there's any possibility of making that condition last a little longer. And I'm speaking from some experience of housing provided by registered social housing, absolutely not Magna, where the property was built and the houses were let, but the landscaping has been a problem for years and years and years because it was never really done and was not maintained for sufficient period of time. 5 years slips by very quickly. Would it be reasonable to make that last for longer than 5 years? Or is that too onerous?
I think overall that Magna will want to have a friendly relationship with its neighbours and provide an appropriate amount of management. But I don't think it's unreasonable to have a longer period. And so we could suggest that 5 years is increased to say 15 years, which I think has been applied in other cases.
Yes. I don't think that I would be very pleased if we could do that, because I don't think that has an impact on viability, in the sense that they have every intention of maintaining this landscaping. Why wouldn't they? But it just helps. I'm just thinking if the property were to change hands to a different care provider or something, 15 years would be helpful. Could we include that? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be very happy with that as well.
Good, thank you very much. Councillor, is that you all, Councillor Rideout for now?
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Chair. A few points. Firstly, the description of this site as a derelict site. I don't particularly like that description. I know it's derelict now, but it wasn't before the owner started knocking things down on it. It was a perfectly good red brick house in the car park. I'm not going to get into the debate about that, but it's just a description. I wouldn't want to upset people who didn't like this happening in the first place. So I think that's unhelpful to call it derelict. In relation to the 31 parking spaces, just to reassure my colleagues, I live quite near two old people's homes, Maiden Castle House in Dorchester and Barnes Lodge in Dorchester. Both of them have plenty of parking, so I have no concerns over the number of parking spaces allocated. So we can take that one off the thing, because they've always got spare spaces there for staff or visitors. My main concern is around the electric substation, please, Simon. I'm listening to Jim and Kate White's concerns and issues around that, and there's a couple of issues there. The noise from that substation, I accept. If that's a hum or a noise, that will be very irritating and it could be almost torture on there. Will there be a noise, or is there a noise from that? And my other question is around the windows overlooking their property. What sort of, have you got a sight of that view from their property, please, and what it looks like? And will there be a request to put opaque windows where appropriate? Thank you.
Thank you. Simon, the substation first.
Yeah, okay. Just let me flick through the plans. Okay, so yeah, this is the location of the substation. I think I've explained why it is that the substation sort of has to be located in this area. There really is no other alternative, more convenient place due to the range of constraints, sewer easements on both access roads, floodplain and ecology buffers to the rear, sort of visual prominence to the frontage. With the condition to secure the details of the appearance of this building, it's going to be brick enclosed with a slate roof. So really, hopefully it's going to end up being quite an attractive outbuilding. And in terms of noise, the condition for the details of the appearance of this building also includes the details of acoustic measures. So in the submission of the details in the future, there will be an acoustic assessment of what the noise input would be upon the enclosure of the substation within a brick building. There was an acoustic report submitted with the planning application, and the applicants are confident that there will be no residual hum or sort of adverse noise. They've undertaken all of the sound testing of the noise levels at the quiet times of the evening, and they're confident that they can fall well within those acceptable dB limits and meet with the relevant policies in the local plan in terms of those noise impacts. So overall, I satisfied myself that this was really the only sensible location. I understand the concerns in terms of the proximity, but I think it's going to end up looking like quite a high quality outbuilding with materials to match the proposed building. I'm also confident that there'll be no undue noise impact on the neighbours, and that can all be secured by the proposed planning condition attached to the application.
Thanks, Owen. I accept your things. I mean, we've had quite a lot of detail about the actual location you've looked to put it, the design and the look of it, and I think it'll look fine. But I think if it makes no noise, the neighbours won't be bothered about it. It'll just soon blend into the background, and it's the noise that's going to be the focal point.
Yeah, and we've satisfied ourselves through the submission of some documentation with the planning application, and the fact that a brick enclosure is probably the most robust thing you're going to get. I think it would be acceptable even without a brick enclosure, but certainly with a brick enclosure, and with that confirmation through the discharge of conditions, giving that further layer of assurance, the neighbours can hopefully be comforted to some extent that there will be no undue noise impact upon them.
Thank you, Simon. And the windows overlooking?
So the windows overlooking, I mean, they're in the assessment, it was considered that 3-storey, 2.5-storey element to the rear of the site will change the outlook to some degree to the neighbouring property. At the moment, you know, that there's nothing there. Previously, the St Martin's care home was further forward into the site, so there will be a change, but it's considered that the distances involved, the intervening access road, the outbuilding to the rear, that the fact that we're in a town centre type location where neighbouring properties are in fairly close proximity to each other, that all of those matters in consideration, that there wasn't going to be an adverse impact upon the neighbours in terms of overlooking to the extent that we could warrant a justification to refuse the application. That it wouldn't be necessary to add a condition in terms of obscure glazing, because most of those windows form separate flats with habitable rooms to bedrooms to kitchens. So it wouldn't be appropriate to obscure glaze them all. So I was confident that even with clear glazing, that there wouldn't be such an adverse impact on those neighbours to warrant a different decision.
So do I take it that the neighbours is there, the round circle there, is that their property there? It would have been helpful to have. That's where you got the cursor. Is that their house there?
So that's their house. So the distance to the start of the 3-storey element is quite significant at 27 metres. And overall, we've got 11 metres to the side boundary here with the intervening access road. And there is some benefit that the proposed building is set further back than St Martin's house was located. So overall, it's considered to be an acceptable impact, acknowledging that there will be some change in relationship and impact on the neighbours.
Thank you. I'm happy.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Fry. Councillor Heatley.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. Both Simon and the agent made references to this development showing very finely balanced viability, or I think one of them said it was on the margins of viability. If something goes wrong, you know, they start digging the foundations and there's a lot of water down the bottom, or something happens that causes the development to be more expensive. What is it that goes? Is it that extra 75% of affordable housing? And how great are the risks, do you think, of that sort of thing happening?
Simon.
It's impossible to really quantify that risk from my personal perspective. The legal agreement will only secure 25% affordable housing, and that is the only element that you should give any real weight to in making this decision. There is a prospect that 75% could be more based on a market type dwelling. I think that's unlikely.
Yes.
The applicant is a registered housing provider. They've shown a clear commitment through a contract with the council for the sale of the land and through a partnership agreement that this will be a 100% social rented development. And that social rented affordable housing developments, they work much more successfully when it's one tenure. So I can't guess what might happen when they get to dig the foundations, but we're satisfied with the proposal in front of us.
I know it's an impossible question, but I suppose I don't in any way doubt the motives of the applicant, but a force majeure can occur in these circumstances, and well, let's hope it doesn't.
Let's hope not. Right.
My second question, page 33 on the papers. There's an account of the energy elements of this development, and basically it says we're going to comply with the building regulations, and I accept that that's essentially what the North Dorset local plan requires, as I understand it. On the other hand, I look at the plans and there's an awful lot of south-facing roofs there. Was there ever any discussion about doing anything with solar panels on those roofs, or did it never arise?
I did have discussions with the applicant and asked them to clarify in what way that they were going to meet their renewable and carbon reduction targets that are set out in building regulations. And they had made an assessment of the most efficient and worthwhile technology to use, and I'm told that comes through a combination of the building fabric itself and also the use of a combined heat and power plant, which is used to provide electricity and hot water for the building. So I think there was some consideration to different types of technology, but that's the one that they've gone with. And actually, I personally think sometimes in sensitive locations that the use of solar panels on the roof planes can detract, and hopefully here we're going to have a nice set of roof materials with plain tile roofs and slate roofs. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Does it, Councillor Heatley?
Well, thank you. But I just note that the main elevation that's important is the front one, and it wouldn't have that effect. But anyway, we are where we are. Thank you.
We are, and indeed it is fair to say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I think in Councillor Heatley's case, there would be nothing more lovely than a good set of solar panels. So yeah, very fair comment. But it's a useful comment to have here in the minutes, because as we say at each meeting, it reminds developers that we do expect them to do their absolute utmost to respond to the climate change agenda, which is so important for Dorset Council and our residents, and where possible to go a little bit further than the minimum that building regs requires. And so you raise a good point, Councillor Heatley. Yes, Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Mark, could I just ask Simon if he could go back to where the bin storage is going to be for the waste?
Yeah, sure. So the communal bin store is located on the north elevation of the building in here.
All right.
And on the site plan, that is around about here.
Okay, so Simon, that's an internal bin storage rather than an external one. The reason I'm asking is because we have sheltered housing in Sherborne, where we have an awful problem with bin storage next or near to adjacent living quarters, which causes an awful problem in the summer, as you can imagine, with flies, etc. So I'm just looking for the future and thinking, what problems are councillors in Gillingham going to have when people get infested with flies in neighbouring properties? So that was just my point really, and my question. So
no, so can we just clarify then the nature of this bin storage then, Simon?
Yeah, it's all internal.
Right. So that
provides easy access to residents without having to go outside. So hopefully no flies in the summer.
No, all right, and that's also just to remind residents, that's the access where the bin lorries can go in to collect, and they can go in and out and come out in a forward gear, as Steve would say, out of that exit. So that's a nice design feature that's kept separate. So
thank you.
Anything else, Councillor Andrews?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
That's lovely. Good. Thank you very much. I am now moving on to Councillor Rideout, who wants to make a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This was always going to be a tricky one. It's been a long time in the coming, and any scheme that's put on this site has to be right. And visually, I think this proposal is sympathetic to past dwellings and current dwellings around the site. It's a sustainable site, it's a brownfield site. You've heard there's a fine line on viability issues on a constrained site, but this proposal will bring huge benefits to Gillingham, to the community. It will become a much valued asset. I've heard everything, I've looked at everything. In my opinion, there are no material considerations to refuse this application, but I do have empathy with neighbouring properties, in particular Lime Tree House. And I would feel a lot happier if we could look at the soft landscaping, and we said, well, with the conditioning of it, probably look at more robust tree planting and evergreen trees, and also look at the privacy screen on the balconies. Thank you.
Good. Is that a proposal to support this then with those two amended conditions, Councillor Ryder?
I'd be happy to support.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chairman.
Who was that?
Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cook. Okay, and you're happy to second with the two amended conditions that the landscaping should go up, should it be extended to 15 years, and that the balconies should provide privacy, should be materials that provide privacy both for the neighbouring users and for the people who are using the balconies themselves.
Happy to take those two points on board, yes, Chairman.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I'm not actually going to. I'm just going to pause and hold the vote now, because we're at just 2 minutes before we need to stop for our silence, and I don't want to be falling in the middle of our vote. So we're going to, at 12 noon, then pause for just a minute silence, and this is a national moment, I think, where we will just reflect that it's a full year since that we've been in lockdown, and it's been a very, very tough year for many of our residents, and it continues to be very tough, and that it's been a very, very demanding year for Dorset Council. And so it's not inappropriate, I think, that we should join the House of Commons and the House of Lords and the rest of the country in just marking this moment. And I think we would particularly, because we are a Dorset Council meeting, we would be particularly want to acknowledge the tremendous pressure that this epidemic has put onto the staff and the members of and all the volunteers who work with Dorset Council, in what has been an unprecedentedly difficult time for all local authorities, but for Dorset Council in particular. And I think you would all agree with me in saying that we would want to acknowledge the tremendous effort that our staff have made over the past 12 months. I'm watching the clock. My one clock says that it's now 12 o'clock, so not just quite yet. So we will wait, and I will tell you when the computer tells me that it is 12 o'clock, and then we will resume our business immediately after the meeting. Thank you. Well, thank you very much indeed, members, and to those people who are listening. So we will resume just as where we were before, but before I move to the vote, there is something that I would like to get into our minutes with regard to this application. And this is in the context of the discussions that we've had and the mentions that have been made of the marginal viability. So I think you would agree with me, members, that this is a key site. It's next to the conservation area, and the quality of the design and the materials that we've heard described for us and the detailing in the brickwork and the windows and so forth is very important to this scheme, to its acceptability. And I think we would not wish to see the detailing watered down at a later date, and we would like to stress that it is important that the scheme is built as approved, and I would like that to be in the minutes. I think we are aware of the viability issues here that might come up, and I for one would be very disappointed if we got a plain red brick building here when officers, the conservation officer and the developers have worked so hard to get a very good design. So if we could add that into the minutes, if that's acceptable to everybody. And we've had a proposer and a seconder to the this application as with the amended conditions, and I will now, if I may, move to the vote. So Councillor Andrews.
Yes, approve, and I have been present.
Thank you. Councillor Cook.
Yes, I'm for this proposal and I've been present throughout.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fry.
For and present all the time.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
For and present all the time.
Thank you. Councillor Heatley.
For and present all the time.
Councillor Jones.
For and present all the time.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
For and I heard everything.
Thank you. Councillor Penfold.
For and present all the time.
Councillor Rideout.
For and present throughout.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Well, that's carried unanimously. That brings us to the end of our morning's business. And so we will now adjourn the committee and we will reconvene, members, if we may, on the dot of 2 o'clock. I can't bring forward agenda item 5D, which would help us get through the business more quickly, because the agenda is published and says that item will be taken at 2 o'clock. So we have to stick to the published agenda. So I will see you all again. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to our officers. Thank you. I think Steve is not going to be with us this afternoon, so thank you, Steve. And I will see you all here again at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Just a point of clarification, Chairman, do we leave this meeting?